Excel ERP course structure. Application. Under applications, we'll be sharing all steps on application setup based on process flow from scratch and not from a demo data pre-installed to a good extent of our trainings. General info provides detailed info on the functionalities, a storyboard, and a course structure to get an overview. Setups. We'll be demonstrating setups across the modules for the complete process flow as part of our trainings. Transaction processing. Here we are going to demonstrate a complete process flow of transaction processing end to end so that you are familiar for the process flow which you have to demonstrate, learn and demonstrate before a client. Configuration guide. This is a vital part in any project. You have to start from the scratch in most of the times. However, we understand the difficulties which we have faced and come up with a sample configuration guide which you can modify and use for your project, and we will share you based upon your request. The sixth one is the test scripts. So, in any project, there are multiple stages like SIT, system integration testing, user access testing, and these are the activities where you have to create test scripts related to your projects. We are hereby simplifying that also by sharing a standard test scripts which you can modify and use in your projects, and we'll share you based upon your request. You have to register to our email ID which is shared in part of this course, and once we are in receipt of that, we'll respond to you at the earliest. In lesson 11, we have stated that we'll be doing different kind of transactions. We have demonstrated the creation of an outbound transaction as well as rejection of a transaction by the recipient. Now we are going to create a credit memo for excess amount debited or even charged to the recipient. Let us see that demonstration in this particular video. I am in the Singapore AGS Super User Responsibility. Click on AGS Super User, Transaction, Outbound. Click on Create. In this case, same steps, but the field where we put the amounts will be different. Transaction type is rate, and here I am adding a description. Credit memo or the reversal of a transaction. Whatever you feel good, you can type it there. Recipient here again is the Ray Global US entity. The only thing here is that we are going to give a credit to the US entity for excess amount debited. So I say that it's a $50 and click on continue. The initiator accounting, select the distribution account and enter the amount. But instead of showing in the credit side, it should be a debit side. And in the recipient accounting, it should be on the credit side. It should appear in Singapore books as a credit memo. That is our objective. I can give a description: excess debit, reversed. Let us submit. So batch 61 is submitted. It will take few minutes to complete the workflow. Let us wait for that. We have created a transaction for $50 to the credit of the US entity. I am the US AGS Super User Responsibility, and the batch which is submitted was 61. Now that batch appears in the US entity. Click on this batch and the description what we have passed on access debit reverse is appearing here, and we have set up the transaction such a way that an acceptance is required. So we can approve this transaction so that the Singapore entity can process a credit memo in favor of the US entity. Click on approve so that transaction disappears from the notifications, and now the same should be available in the Singapore entity to process further to issue a credit memo. I am in the Singapore AEA superuser responsibility. Go to transaction and click on outbound and look for the batch 61. So you can see that batch amount is negative 50 and submitted. That's all, and we have to submit a process for generating the credit memo in receivable and passing on the same to the payable in the US books. So we have to go and run certain programs. Click on home and click on the request. Click on schedule, and again we are processing the receivable processing first, then submit. A request is generated. Let us wait for that to complete. So the program is completed. This was the request we have submitted, and click on the output. You can see the report is so good here, and it provides the detailed information. Here what is happening like that, in US dollar $50 credit memo is generated, and you can see that in the Singapore ledger it will be 69.15 because in terms of the Singapore currency. So in US dollar it will be $50, and in Singapore in terms of in the transaction currency wise, in the functional currency wise, it will be 69.15 Singapore dollar. But how the transaction will be recorded in terms of the transaction currency. So let us go to the receivable application in Singapore and see that whether the credit memo for $50 is being generated or not. I am in Singapore AI superuser responsibility. We are in transactions, and we have to query the credit memo. So here the batch date was 24th October, and sources was Global Intercompany, and it should be a credit memo what we are looking for. Let us see. See, there is a credit memo for $50. So this is how a credit memo can be generated or created in the sender side in case if there are excess debits are passed on to the recipient. If you look at the distributions, it should be in the reverse side. Say like it will be negative amounts. Receivable is less by $50 and revenue less by $50. And however, when you account, it will be in terms of the Singapore dollars, because these currencies in Singapore US dollars, the transactions, and the functional currency will be in Singapore dollar. So system will record the difference according to the exchange rate you defined in your general ledger. So similar way we have to process for the payable side to send to the US entity too. We'll do that. So I am going to run the transfer intercompany transaction to payables program and going to submit, and this program can be submitted either from the US entity or from the Singapore entity. It doesn't matter. So a new request is being submitted. We'll wait for that to complete. The payable, the request what we have submitted intercompany transaction to payable program, concurrent program is being completed, and you can see payable open interface import is also got completed, and there's an output file here. So it states that there is a invoice is generated, and there's a credit. It's to a credit of the transaction. So let us query that in the US entity to see that it is being uh, available in the US ledger or not. We have to go to US ledger and see that this transaction appearing in the US ledger. We are in the US AP super user responsibility. Click on invoices and pass on the batch number, the invoice number what we saw in our report, and we can select as type as credit memo, and just click on file, or you can pass on the date also. So you can see that a credit memo is generated in the US books for $50, and click on the distribution so that there is a negative amount for this particular account, being the excess debit reversed by Singapore entity sent to the US counterpart. This is how a credit memo is getting processed in AGIS. This ends our session for lesson level, where we covered a creation of an outbound transaction, a rejection of a transaction, as well as generation of a credit memo as part of the AGS processing.